This is my survival / replenishment kit. For years I used to carry around one of those Altoids tins that are quite popular among people who like to make or carry around survival kits. And although they have their use, in reality they really are a bit too small. What tends to happen with those type of survival kits is you put them together and you carry them around almost as a sort of peace of mind, but you never use any of the stuff inside it, and most of it's fairly impractical in a real life situation. So my thinking is that if you're going to carry a survival kit, and I think you probably should, certainly in some places of the world where wildernesses are truly wilderness, you should make it one that's actually useful, something that you're actually going to be able to use the items inside it. And better yet, if you can build your kit around stuff that you already utilise and use anyway as part of your everyday kit while you're on, out camping or whatever, then it becomes more of a replenishment kit rather than something that you're just aimlessly carrying weight around, for the sake of it. So I think a mistake that some people tend to make is they will either go too small with the Altoids tin type survival kits, or they will go too big and they will start putting together kits as big as this and saying that's their survival kit. The way I tend to think of it is that this is the perfect size for a survival kit, and this will sit inside my kit here, which is a utility pouch. This is my bushcraft utility pouch, which saves me carrying all of this kind of gear inside a backpack. I'll go into that in another video though. For just now I want to just focus entirely on this. From a weight point of view, I'll put the weight on this, but it's not really much heavier or any heavier than most survival kits that you would go out and buy. And it's important to emphasise as well that things like the tin, the cup, the metal cup, this is my only cooking pot that I take with me. So this isn't an additional metal container just for a survival kit. This is actually the metal container that I would use every day. So just starting from the top as it is. Okay, I've got Gorilla Tape, a decent sized roll of Gorilla Tape or cargo tape. There's lots of different kinds of this. I think the Gorilla Tape is pretty good. Duct tape and stuff is also pretty good, and I've seen T-Rex tape is okay. So a decent sized roll. This, like most things, has endless uses. Primarily what I tend to use it for is repairs of quick fire repairs of kit, holding taping up straps and things like that, making small repairs. You can use it as a sticking plaster, and there's people who have done entire series on just things you can do with cargo tape. A rubber band. This is from a bit of an inner tube, and that's really just to hold this together all in one place so it's nice and contained. But it can also be used as an excellent means of fire lighting. Even when it gets wet, you can easily dry it off, light the end of a piece of this, and it will burn excellent to get a fire going. The container itself, it should be at least 750ml, I think, for one person. I can pretty much cook all of the food I need and boil all of the water that I need just with this size of pot. If you can get one with a lid, that's even better. The material, I mean, you get titanium, you get stainless steel. I have both kinds. I would use titanium if I was going for a lightweight type hike, but for the most part stainless steel is probably the best material to use for this kind of container, because it's the best type of metal for saving energy when you're heating water, and it's quite robust. The good thing about this container, which came from the Pathfinder School, the Self-Reliance Outfitters shop, which is Dave Canterbury's store, it has holes in the cup but also grooves along the side, grooves cut into the lid, so that you can use this with baling wire or a fish mouth spreader or something along those lines. So something that you might want to add if you don't have a fish mouth spreader is wrap a little bit of snare wire around the top of the cup, which then becomes snare wire, but it also then becomes a means for you to hang this as a hanging pot. Getting into the inside of it then. Contents protected with just a double Ziploc bag. So you can see now that when I want to use my cup for cooking or, you know, drinking out of or something, I have access to my cup, and my survival kit comes out in a oneer like this. It doesn't just spill out all over the place. It's not packed in such a way that every little intricate item is put inside the container itself, because then you have to empty it all out all over the place in order just to use your cup, and then you're sitting there putting it all back together like a jigsaw puzzle. You need something like this, so you can just put it right back in, take it right back out again. The importance of a container in a survival situation really can't be emphasised enough. It's incredibly difficult to make an alternative to this in nature, and will make your life a hell of a lot easier when it comes to boiling water and cooking or gathering things in. The freezer bag simply helps me protect the contents from getting wet. I always have it in my mind that I'll take a submersion into water for whatever reason, and I want to make sure that all of my important kit is protected from moisture. The bag itself is also another means of carrying something in. Just as a quick bonus note, I'll talk about this container itself a little bit, because it took a little bit of thinking for me to come up with this. Originally what I was looking to do was find a container that would perfectly fit nest inside my cup, like a Tupperware container or something like that, and I searched everywhere for one and could never find one that was the correct size. So what I ended up doing was taking my water bottle, which is the water bottle that goes with the cup. It's just a sort of Nigene bottle type size. They tend to nest together with these kinds of cups. I put a freezer bag around the outside of the water bottle, and then just wrapped the Gorilla Tape around it until it formed a container. And because you started off with the plastic bag, it was easy to slip off the water bottle once you'd finished wrapping it around, but it also then made a waterproof cup. So I now have this other waterproof cup that's quite strong and, you know, incredibly lightweight. I just lined a little bit of the inside of it with more Gorilla Tape, and then put some around the top to protect it from fraying away. A saw. You get lots of different kinds of these keyring type saws. They come in just about every survival kit. What I would say is they do work if you're careful with them. You put a stick in either one of these eyelets and then you can use it to saw logs, but you have to be careful not to snap the ends off when you're sawing. The cheap ones are very easy to break, so if you're going to buy one, buy a dedicated one. I can't remember exactly what type I got, where I got this one from. I'll try and find out and I'll put a link to it in the description below. But I had a shot of one of these. I bought two of them. I had a shot of one of them and tested it pretty much to destruction. It did take a little bit of abuse before I broke it, which is a good thing, because it means if the situation would ever arise, I'll take more care in using this one. So a decent saw, a whistle, could be any kind of whistle, just make sure it's a fairly loud one. A lighter, just a normal sort of Bic type lighter, or, you know, try and use a Flint lighter, not an electric one, but it's an obvious thing to add to a kit. Foil blankets, Mylar type blankets or space blankets, whatever you want to call them. You get lots of very poor quality types and you get a few good quality types. If you're going to get one, try and get the type that doesn't just rip very easily, the type that you can poke your finger through without much care. They're incredibly useful items for making shelters or using in combination with sleep systems in order to try and keep yourself warm. I think they're well worth having in survival kits, so get yourself a Mylar blanket, and they fold down to practically nothing. They don't weigh very much either. A knife, a small folding knife, but a decent one, not something that's just going to break or fall apart. An actual decent little folding knife. This Garber folder fits perfectly into my cup, doesn't take up a lot of room, and is razor sharp. Excellent little knife, and I think it's worth having a knife inside the survival kit. Some people don't think it's worth having a knife in a survival kit. I do. A few safety pins. They're one of those things where in reality I just had this left over from a previous survival kit. I've never had to use any before, but they are useful in the sense that, you know, you can use them like a safety pin and, you know, hold clothing together, turn them into fish hooks, use them for little things. But for all they take, you know, there's 6 or 7 of them in this little bag, and they just, you know, weighs nothing and it's in there. Try not to get carried away with putting things into your survival kit that you know you don't really need or you will never really use just because they fit, which is kind of what I did with these. But I think they probably have got a bit more of a utility. I'm just not paying them enough attention to think about what that utility could be. Storm matches, all weather military matches with a striker in a separate compartment. It's worth having another means of ignition, and these kind of matches are very good. You know, you can dip them into water and things and they'll still light. They're worth having, but bear in mind that they don't last forever, these matches, and they can actually, and I've actually seen this happen, is that they eventually decompose inside the bag, and the bag eventually swells up and they become useless. These are you know, military issue, NATO issue type matches. I find them to be pretty good. I've got a lot of them because they come with ration packs. You find these inside the MREs and ration packs and things like that, and it's worth having them, it's worth carrying them, but just bear in mind that they don't last forever, so you do have to cycle them out at least every few years. Orange garbage bag. A large orange garbage bag. You want to try and find one that's extra tough as well. You can get industrial type garbage bags like this. This one is actually for carrying clinical waste. It's a clinical waste bag. So it has a UN number and stuff on it. So you don't have to get one exactly like this, but really all that's saying is that it's not just your standard trash bag that you would use in your household. It's a little bit more robust than that. You want to find yourself an orange one, because this then becomes your means of attracting attention. You can open this up and lay it out. Orange is a very good colour for being identifiable in just about every kind of condition that you can find yourself in. Having a decent sized bag like this means that at a push you can use it as a means for shelter. You can open this up and it can become part of a roof. You could use it for putting your feet into, if you were trying to treat your feet for cold and you were trying to warm them up, and once you wrap your feet up and try and get some heat into them, you know, put these over the top of it like a bit of a bivvy. Or you can actually just use it as a garbage bag. I found myself using these at campsites before that other people have left a lot of trash around, and I found myself filling one of these up and carrying that stuff out, but that's another story. Candle. Not one of those dinky little ones, not a little birthday candle, but just a cut down normal dinner candle, I think these get called. I cut it down to the size where it would fit inside my container. Obviously it's a candle, so its use as a means of light. Also it's a means of keeping sure fire, so it can be a lot easier to light the end of a candle if you're on your last match, and then take your candle to your fire, rather than relying on it that one match, hoping you get that fire going for the first time. So it's another one of those things that you should carry in your kit. Dirian rod, flint stick, whatever you like to call it, just a means for making fire again. I've took the plastic handle off it and I've wrapped it with a little bit of silver Gorilla Tape, because the plastic handle was of no real use. The Gorilla Tape is of course another thing that can be used. You can also use the tape for, you know, fire as well. So another means of setting the fire. That's now, you know, the lighter, the matches for a Dirian stick. That's 3 so far. Signal mirror. So this is the type that has the mirror with the little hole. Some instructions on the back as to how to use it in order to signal aircraft using the sun. You can get much thinner, more flexible versions of this, which apparently work just as well. They're obviously lighter and easier to pack, so take a look at those. Or these are the standard type. These are the type that they give fighter pilots in their survival kits. So, you know, if it works for them, you know, it can work for me. Fresnel lens. It's really just a flexible magnifying glass, and they genuinely do work as a means of lighting fire if you've got good direct sunlight. They don't last forever by doing that, and what you're actually a lot better off having is an actual proper little glass magnifying lens which you can use to light fire. The other use for this is also to use it as a means of, you know, inspecting wounds or looking for, you know, ticks or whatever. The signal mirror that I was talking about, there is actually a version kind of looks like this, only it's mirrored and has a hole in the middle, but it's the same sort of size and it's just as flexible, so something to look for. Wax cotton discs. I've got 3 of them here. These are my favourite way to light a fire. Homemade, these ones, or you can buy them. And basically it's a cotton disc which is soaked in an accelerant and then dipped in wax, which makes it waterproof and prevents the flammable fluid from evaporating away. You can rip these into quarters and it will take a spark very easily and get a fire going, and can burn for a good 2 or 3 minutes. I'll put a link to a video of how to make these in the description. Sail needles. I've got a few different sizes of sail needle in here. A sail needle is it's a needle that you use for repairing sails, but it's incredibly good as an all-round item for repairing clothes, equipment, tough bags. You've got these you know, Cordura type bags. This kind of needle will actually push through that material, unlike a normal sew needle would just break or bend. These can actually do the job. You can also use them as a type of, you know, for removing scalps or ticks and things like that. You don't need to have a multitude of them like this. I think probably the best thing to do would be to pick the size that you thought was the most useful and then tape it to you know, the back of your knife or something that you keep inside here. I always have one of these taped to the back of my knives anyway. So a sail needle. Cordage. I found myself over the years slowly but surely moving away from paracord as a means of my only form of cordage. Paracord is obviously excellent because it's very strong, it's fairly cheap and it's relatively rot resistant, and I think most people know when it comes to that kind of cordage the multitude of uses that it has with the 7 strands within it. The thing about paracord is it is bulky though. I mean, it's okay to carry it around in your primary kit. I use paracord for my ridge lines and things like that, but I'm slowly but surely moving towards using bank line for most things. Bank line has you know, it's not as strong as paracord. Paracord's obviously £550. This is about £165 breaking tension, but it's so much more compact. It still has 3 cords within it, 3 strands. You get a couple of different types of this, different gauges. I think this is number 36 bank line, and it's tarred, so it's got a tar coating which helps prevent rot and things like that. But you get a twisted version. There's three strands in this, and you get a twisted version, which is what this is, so it's easy to untwist, and then you've got 3 separate strands that you can use for sewing, stitching. It's even good as fishing line, snare wire, things like that. Or you get a braided type, which is exactly the same, but it's harder to take apart because it's, you know, it's braided. But there's a very good amount of line. I don't know exactly the length of line I've got here. That's something I should probably look into finding out. But I know it's a lot, and it's a hell of a lot more than I would be able to fit inside this container if I was using paracord instead of this. With this amount of line, I know for a fact I can build shelters, more than one shelter. I could set up multiple fishing lines on the bank. I could probably set a couple of snares just with this one little roll. It's just got a piece of tape on it to hold it together. One thing I think I would probably change out, because weight and space is everything when it comes to these kind of kits. I've got this rolled up by simply, I took an old wooden spoon and I broke the end of it and I just wrapped the cordage around it. You could remove the piece of wood altogether and then squash this together and then just have more cordage, or you could replace this piece of wood with maybe a piece of fat wood or something, so that the wood itself then becomes a useful item. At the moment, this piece of wood doesn't really have any other use other than just wrapping this cord around, so a one-use item in a survival kit is not a good item. So something for me to think about anyway. The last item I've got in here, fishing kit. Now, fishing kits are another one of those things that you can have endless amounts of the stuff. So what I did was I purchased a cheap survival fishing kit, this type, which is pretty much designed with jigging in the sea in mind. So it has a small hand reel, and it came with a few big hooks and a few weights and a couple of lures, and the idea being that you would sort of just jig off the side of a life raft or maybe off a pier or something like that. I purchased the kit. I changed out the line for something that I think would be a little bit more use in rivers and things like that, because I'm predominantly inland as opposed to coastal or at sea. I added a couple of different lures, a few extra hooks of varying sizes, and I also put some pre-rigged wire traces and pre-rigged lines in there so that I don't have to mess around with my fishing tackle should I ever need this. This is fairly ready to go. It's also just spares for a larger fishing kit that I've got that I keep inside my utility pouch. Another hobo type kit that I carry around with me. I'll put a link to the video that I made about that in the description. So I will often take some of the items out of this to use in that if I was doing a little bit of fishing in a small burn or something like that, a small stream. But it should also actually be a genuine fishing kit. It's I could now, with just this piece of kit, if I was at a stream or a small a small lake, I could use this as a genuine piece of fishing gear. It's not just a gimmick. So the first thing you've got to really ask yourself, well, what exactly is a survival kit? Well, to me, a survival kit is highly dependent on the environment that you're likely to be in. If I was thinking I was going to go on a yachting trip around the world and I wanted to put a dump bag together where if the yacht was sinking and I was thinking I was going to find myself inside a life raft, I would put together a different kit from what's inside this tin. If I was going to be going to an environment that was entirely tropical based or cold weather based, then that might also change my mind on what kind of kit I'm likely to take. And the size is dependent on the duration that you're likely to be in the place and what can you actually physically take with you. If you're going on an overland expedition and you have a jeep, then you can take a large backpack size survival kit if you think that's necessary. So for me, it was really around what is it I tend to like to do, and for me it's multi-day trips and woodlands like this, primarily in the UK but also in other places I might find myself. And this I think is probably the most practical survival kit that you can put together / replenishment kit. The reason I'm saying replenishment kit and emphasising that point is because all of the items in here are actually used. I don't see the point really of carrying items around in your backpack that you simply never use, because I mean you're really just carrying around dead weight for the off chance that you might at some point somehow have to use that one item, as if that one item would make all the world of a difference. The reality is that a survival kit is really just a few items that aren't easy to recreate in nature, and if you were stuck within one area for some reason, those items have to be something that would make your stay there a little bit more comfortable. Survival, I mean, is it really going to make a difference to whether you live or die? In reality, probably not. It could do, but I would question whether that was likely to be the case. So for me, let's assume that I'm in a woodland like this. It's this kind of time of year, it's not particularly cold at the moment. This is what I would have as my survival kit. There's one or two items in here that are actually missing because I've either utilised them or I've had second thoughts about them. And there's a few items that I know people will say, well, why did you include this? And I'll maybe list a few of those items at the end and say why I didn't include those, because that's the other thing about survival kit. Once you start thinking about all of the little things you think would be useful or you would miss if you found yourself trapped in a location, the list of items are almost endless. I mean, and that's why you end up with gigantic survival kits. Or you start off with an Altoids tin and you try everything possible to make those items so small that they fit inside the tin, but in reality you're really just removing the functionality of them. So there's a couple of things missing from this kit that I see in a lot of other survival kits that some people might be thinking they're absolutely necessary. One of the first ones being is a compass. I do recommend putting a compass into your survival kit. I had one of those button type compasses that you see everywhere in this kit, but when I tested it against a couple of decent compasses, I realised that it was not functioning as a compass. It was pointing the wrong direction, that's the problem with those type of compasses. It's one of those things where you've heard the saying, one is none, two is one. But when it comes to those type of compasses, or compasses in general, you really need 3 of them, because you have 2 compasses and they're both pointing a different direction to north. Which one's right? It's a 50-50 split. So my thinking along the lines of compasses is either have 1 or have 3. But in reality what you want to do is carry a dedicated compass, a proper compass, which isn't going to fit inside a survival kit like this, but you should have that at hand with you anyway. Another thing you didn't see inside my survival kit was any kind of first aid kit. I don't think a first aid kit is necessary in a survival kit. I think first aid kits are standalone items. So standalone items have their own complete items list within them, and really the only thing you could fit in here that you could call a first aid kit would be a few band-aids. So for treating small cuts and scrapes that you're likely to get that a band-aid would be useful for, that's when I would use my cargo tape again. This becomes my first aid kit in those kind of situations. A cotton bandana, an orange bandana, another thing that I see in survival kits, also quite a useful item. I did actually have a bandana which I wrapped around the outside of this, and then it sort of slid inside my cup as well. I lost it, so it's one of those things where I was taking it in and out on a recent camping trip, and I think I put it down on the ground and it blew away. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, a bandana, a cotton bandana, a piece of cotton cloth is a good thing to have. It can be used as a filter, it can be used to protect you from the sun, you can use it for making char cloth, you can use it as a means of attracting attention if you get an orange one. Lots of uses for things like cotton bandanas, so I would add that to this kit, and I will do once I get myself another one. Magnesium blocks to go along with the fire steel. I had one of them for a long time inside my Altoids tin, and I tried using it a few times, and they do work. You scrape the piece of magnesium off and then you apply a spark to it and it will burn hot and get a fire going. I'm of the view that the space and the weight that a magnesium block takes up would be better served just having more of these, because you can, if you want to, scrape off some of this without causing a spark and get the exact same effect. Magnesium blocks I think are a bit of a waste of a time and something of a gimmick. I think you're better off making your own survival kit rather than going and buying a survival kit. Or if you are going to buy survival kits, buy a couple of different kinds, take the items out of it that you think might be good and use those to make your survival kit. Take only what is genuinely useful, what's genuinely going to be an item of use and not just an item for gimmick purposes. Actually practice using the items within your survival kit, and better yet, make your survival kit part of your replenishment for kit that you use anyway when you're camping or out and about. That way you're interchanging the items within your kit so that they're not just festering away, because in reality, from a survival point of view, if you take the idea that you're only going to break into your survival kit if you're in a survival situation, thankfully for most of us that's never. But what that means is you're literally carrying around stuff that will never ever get used. I use everything in my survival kits because, I use that tape quite regularly when I'm on camping trips. That's the tape I'll use. I use this metal cup. I use most of the items inside this all of the time. Adapt your survival kits to the environment that you're going to be in. So that's climate dependent. Are you at altitude? Are you at sea level? What time of year is it at? What's a useful resource for the place that you're going to be? Let me know if you think I've missed anything, or if there's something that you think is vital for a survival kit. I'm always interested in people's thoughts on these things because they're such a contentious issue and people do it in so many different ways. Leave your comments at the bottom.